This webinar was recorded for subrecipients of the Tennessee Strong Families Grant on April 16, 2025. PJ Snodgrass, PhD, TCEP Learning Coordinator at SWRPS, was our subject matter expert presenter. The training was designed to present subrecipients with practical steps for having successful conversations with clients, to understand how to use dialogue to move clients towards their goals, and to learn how making clients feel safe during these tough conversations can result in better outcomes. The slides and reference materials are posted on our webpage for your reference and review.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me just for a little bit to talk about difficult conversations. And I want to thank Brooke for inviting me to do this. Like Chase said, I'm a learning consultant. I work in SWRPS, but I work with the TCEP grant, which is the Tennessee Child Support Education and Parenting Program. Can't believe I remembered what it stood for. So I'm the learning consultant for the TCEP grant. And if you don't know about them, the coordinators, who are the field workers, go out in the field and they work with non-custodial parents who've been ordered to pay child support and they're not. And this program, the TCEP program, helps them get a job, get back on their feet financially, help them in so many ways. Sometimes they come to us with drug or alcohol problems. Often they're homeless. Sometimes they have mental health problems. So, there's just a whole myriad of problems that they come to the program with. But they get in the program, they get assistance, they get help, get back on their feet, and start making child support payments, and ideally reconnect with their children as much as possible. So I try to arrange training for them. Before, I've been in SWRPS a little over 2 years with the TCEP program, but before that, I've actually worked at UT for like 35 years, mostly in the IT department. And I also worked at the Institute for Public Service, which meant I was a training consultant. I traveled across the state from Johnson City to Memphis, teaching management programs. So all the soft skills about conversations, about motivation, about conflict, and all that kind of stuff. So really enjoyed that. Then I also worked at the UT Gardens for about 4 years doing therapeutic horticulture. And I learned how to use plants and gardening in a therapeutic way, which I know I'm a big gardener and gardening is my therapy. I'll admit that. So anyway, we're going to talk about difficult conversations today. We're going to break out into breakout rooms a couple of different times. So I encourage you to participate in those fully as much as you can. If at any time you have a question, feel free to unmute or put a question or a comment in the chat. And if I don't see that, Chase, if you could let me know, I'll address that. But again, let's get started. So we're going to talk about difficult conversations. Our topics are going to be, you're going to learn how you can take and to hold successful conversations, and then understand how you can use dialogue to move your clients toward success, and then learn the importance of making the meeting safe. Now, I will say the one thing I really, really like about this type of training is that you can use this anywhere in your life, not just at work, because, having a difficult conversation isn't limited to the workplace or people that you work with. You can have difficult conversations with your family, with your coworkers, with your children, with people in your church or your book club or whatever. Chances are you've had a difficult conversation one time or another with people in all areas of your life. So what I really like about this course, and what I encourage you to do, is think about different ways and different places you can apply these skills, okay? Not just at work. So talk about what makes a conversation difficult. So at least there's two people involved. It takes two people to have a conversation. There are differing opinions or views. So, there's not a match up there. And then emotions can run high. Now, sometimes you can start out a conversation and it turns difficult. Or sometimes okay, I need to have this conversation with my coworker and I know it's going to be difficult. So you go in knowing that. So those are the two basic situations. But like I said, there's differing opinions or views and emotions can run high. Now, what happens right off the bat when you think about that conversation that could be difficult or something like that, what happens? What do you feel physically? First of all, your heart rate increases. Your respiration may increase. You may start sweating. Basically, what I like to say is our bodies kind of turn against us. We're trying to remain all calm and all this kind of stuff and work through this in an adult productive way. But our body's going, oh, geez, this isn't good. So all that stuff's going on and get in this fight or flight mode. Okay. So your body kind of turns against you. So just learning to be aware of that may help you to just kind of calm your body down, calm your mind down, and say, okay, this is a tense situation, but I know how to get through it. Okay. And again, if anybody has any question at any time, please just jump in. So, right now, I want you to think about your conversation. And maybe you want to make a note for yourself. So, think back about a conversation you've had that didn't go well. I know I've had those. Phew, some of them really didn't go well. And so, or think about a conversation you're not having that you need to have, and you're going, oh, I don't want to poke that bear. I don't want to go there, for all of these reasons. Okay, so either a conversation that didn't go well, or think about a conversation you need to have that you've not had for different reasons. What's the issue? Okay, there must be a difference of opinion, or somebody's feelings got hurt, or something like that. So, what's the issue? And then, if you had that conversation, when did you realize it was going wrong? So, there's a point in the conversation it's going off the rails, it's not going to be good. Or why have you not had that conversation? Okay, either situation. So, I want you to kind of keep that in mind as we go through this little training here. And we're going to revisit this at the end. Okay. All right. Let's talk about conversation. Where to start? I want to emphasize the benefit of reflection before and after a meeting. So let's say that you've had a meeting that didn't go well, maybe with the client or a coworker, and you can reflect on that. What went well? What didn't go well? What was your role? Maybe you were working with a coworker and you were trying to work out some difficulty. And what did you bring to that situation? So before you go into that situation again, you can reflect about what went well, what didn't, and plan. Preparation is very, very valuable. And so plan, maybe even write out questions or rehearse what you want to say. Because I know even like for this training, I've been rehearsing this on my back porch. And of course, my neighbors know that I talk to myself all the time, but it's just, I've been rehearsing, and there's a lot of benefit to that because you just kind of prepare your mind for what if this happens? What if they say this? What if they ask that? So then you're more prepared when you go into that conversation. And I also like to think about what Stephen Covey says, begin with the end in mind. Okay. So you start this meeting with how you want it to end. You want it to end successfully with an agreement, with a mutual purpose. Okay. So let's start talking about that, actually beginning the conversation. The meeting space is very important. And I know it may not be, I don't know what your all's situation is, but the TSEP coordinators have to go to some effort, let's say, to have a comfortable meeting space. Many times they meet their participant the first time in the courthouse. They've just walked out of the courtroom. They may have just gotten chewed out by a judge or a magistrate, and maybe the judge said, okay, if you get in the TSEP program, I won't send you to jail. So they come out of there and they're all stressed, understandably. And then, the TSEP coordinator introduces and says, okay, I'm here to help you. But I know that they do make every effort to find a corner where they can talk privately. Sometimes they're able to find a room in the courthouse where they can talk, but privacy is very important. And so, not only for the visual, some people don't want to be seen talking to someone where they're getting help, but you might want to make sure they're not overheard by people that are just passing by. And of course, make it comfortable as much as you can. But one of the most important things about that meeting space is how you sit, where you sit. You can see in that image right there that the two people are facing each other. As much as possible, you need to face each other. Because if you're even talking to, let's say, one of your staff members, maybe about a performance issue or they're behind on their project, sitting behind a desk instead of sitting at a table with them can really change the mode and the tone of the meeting, puts you more on equal footing. Okay. That way, too, you can also better read their nonverbal signals, because all the research I've ever read says that nonverbal signals make up about 90% of our communication. Because you think face, hands, I talk with my hands a lot, your body, how you move your body, how you sit, you communicate quite a bit with your body. And that, it's all that nonverbal. So, and then, try to make sure the room's comfortable temperature wise. I know when I was traveling doing all my training, most of the time I was training in a municipal building, a city hall, or things like that. And the one thing I didn't have control of was temperature. And the one thing I got the most complaints about was temperature. So if you can, try to make the temperature conducive to having a good conversation. Let's move on. Now we're going to start that conversation. You've planned, you've reflected, you've got the meeting place set up. Now you're going to start. What you want to do first is let the other person know what your good intent is up front. Of course, introduce yourself. It's the first meeting, but if not, again, if it's a coworker, what I want to do today is talk about how I can help you get your projects done on time and learn about what I can do to remove some barriers. So you present your good intent up front, okay? Then you can ask questions. And asking questions first puts you more in control of how that conversation is going to go. And I know that, you do need to ask things, especially if you're working with a client, you need specific things. You have to ask closed questions like, their name, where they live, maybe what their situation is, about the age of their child, and things like that. But after that, you need to start trying to use open-ended questions to hear their story, because you want to find their story. You want to hear their story so you can help them. And of course, all the time, you're monitoring your body language and theirs, okay? Because, it could change during the meeting, depending on what's said. So you start with that good intent. Now, you get into this conversation. I want to talk about conversation versus dialogue. So you seek to understand the other person by asking open-ended questions, not just, what did you do today, or how much money do you make, or whatever, but you ask more open-ended questions about why are you here? What are your expectations? Tell me about what you're struggling with. Those open-ended questions, and then, of course, use the power of listening. And we'll talk about that a little bit more just in a few minutes. So I'd like for you to think about when you start that conversation, you're creating a pathway to build a mutual purpose for you to share, for them to share, for them to feel safe, for you to feel safe. And so you can work together successfully. So I kind of like to think, you're building a pathway or a highway. And so maybe at first the highway may have potholes in it or something, but you keep working until you get everything smoothed out so you can share information back and forth and everybody feels safe. Okay. And you're building a mutual purpose. It's very important that you build a mutual purpose because if you're at odds, then you may as well not have the discussion. So that's conversation. Now, conversation and a dialogue is different. Okay, so a conversation is usually casual. What I like to say sometimes, it's when you come to work on Monday morning and everybody's kind of gathering around talking about their weekend. And the phrase I used to talk about mom and them. So did you go see mom and them this weekend? How are they doing? That kind of thing. So that's more of a conversation. It's casual. It can be fragmented. You can start a conversation and pick it up again later. Okay. Dialogue is very different in that it's structured, it's purposeful, you have a goal in mind, and your idea is to resolve a conflict, achieve mutual understanding, and it's very focused. So you have a definite goal in mind, or that like that. So it's usually a discussion between like an advisor and a client, a student and a teacher, or maybe a parent and a child, somebody like that. So a dialogue is much deeper and more structured than a conversation. Okay. Now, one of my favorite descriptions of dialogue comes from Dr. William Isaacs, a book that I have studied. And he says, conversation, the dialogue is a conversation with a center, not sides. And I think that's very important. Try to get that concept. So when you're sitting there with the other person and you're sitting facing each other and you want to have a dialogue, think of it as the situation you're trying to resolve or the mutual purpose you're trying to reach is between the two of you. So you're almost like in this little circle. You've got this pathway going, and the mutual purpose is here in between. So you're trying to get to this mutual purpose. They're trying to get to this mutual purpose. That I hope that makes sense. So you're really working on the same thing, and it's in the center. It's not, oh, my side or your side. It's this issue or this purpose in the middle that we're both adding information to. We're both working on to resolve. Okay. So I just want you to think about that. It's just, okay. So it's when two or more people think together. So like I said, you're working on that mutual purpose or working on resolving that conflict together. And dialogue also attempts to bring change at the source of our thoughts and feelings rather than just at the results of our thinking. So we're not just trying to change what people see on the outside, our behavior, we're trying to get at the source of that. Why are they angry? Why are they frustrated? Why are they upset? Get to that source. That's what dialogue helps you do. Okay. And then you build that mutual purpose together. Okay. All right. Now, we're going to go into a chat room in just a minute. So after this slide, we're going to go chat with Maria. But before we do that, I want to talk about active versus deep listening. And of course, y'all probably know about active listening, and it requires concentration, paying attention, maybe reflecting to the person what you thought they said. You are aware of your nonverbal cues. maybe you smile or nod your head. Maybe you lean in a little bit just to let them know you're really listening. You're really paying attention. Versus deep listening focuses on that emotional and relational aspect of the conversation. And that's when you use your skills to show empathy, to show that you're really present and that you really connect with what they're saying. So to me, the deep listening is almost like you're um, listening and paying attention to why they're saying what they're saying, not just what they're saying. Okay. And you may think, well, when I met with them last time, they said this and now they're saying this other thing. Why? What's changed? So, you use deep listening maybe to get to why they're saying or why they feel that way. Okay. And so, but at least going back to active listening, you can use phrases to let people know, like, I hear what you're saying. Can you tell me more about that? And phrases like that can also lead you into dialogue, especially like when you say, can you tell me more about that? It sounds like you're feeling this. And you say, well, how did that make you feel? Things like that, or at least even saying, I appreciate you explaining that to me. I appreciate you sharing that to me. I know that had to be difficult. So you say things like that to really make the person feel safe and feel like they can share information with you. Okay. All right. Now we're going to chat with Maria, and you're going to go into breakout rooms and talk about Maria. And I've got some questions on the next slide. So what I'd like for you to do is discuss this in your breakout rooms. Pick someone to report out when you come back, and then we'll talk about your responses. So Maria is a 25-year-old new mother. She recently gave birth to her first child, and she is also the sole provider for her family. She hasn't had a lot of support, and her partner or the father of the baby is either not present or at least not able to help financially. Okay. So before the pregnancy, she was enrolled in a part-time college program and working full-time. Yay, Maria, she's really trying. Her paid FMLA is going to be running out soon. So now she feels overwhelmed by the pressure to go back to work, to take care of her child, all the while trying to figure out how to finish her education so she can better support herself and her child. Okay. Great goals there. She fears if she doesn't go back to work and school soon, she won't be able to make ends meet for her and her baby. So she's got a lot of guilt, a lot of stress about leaving her baby with somebody else to return to work, and she feels trapped. Okay. So in your breakout rooms, I would like for you to discuss what would you say to Maria about her feelings of guilt and stress about leaving her baby with someone so she can return to work. What would you ask Maria? So, what would you say to her? What would you ask Maria about that guilt and stress? Second, how would you help Maria set priorities for achieving her goals? What would you ask her about her priorities? And then when we come back, I'd like for you to give me an idea of what skills you would use when you were talking with Maria. We've talked about a few of them. We're going to talk about more, but what skills would you use when talking with Maria? Okay. So go in your breakout rooms, appoint someone to report out, and then we'll be back in 5 minutes. Okay, so let's hear from the rooms. Let's see. Room number 1 was Alexis, Asia, Carla, Morgan, and Stephanie. Who did you nominate to report out?
We did not nominate anyone, but Morgan was the lead on it. But overall, we stated that, identifying her, validating her feelings of guilt about going back to
Yeah,
work.
can y'all hear
And
me?
for
Yeah.
Looking at her supports and making sure that she has that support to work through, and before you introduce different daycares and different options for her.
Okay.
So we definitely started out just validating her feelings.
Okay. And about the priorities, did you talk about setting priorities?
No, we didn't get that far.
Okay,
So,
that's fine.
we stayed on the first question a little bit.
What do
So
you think what skills would you use when talking with Maria? I heard, just listening to you, I heard a couple of skills, but what would you
yeah,
say?
just identifying, definitely seeing her thoughts, making sure that she's comfortable with everything, her goals, setting her goals, and so finding that support, you know, you have that support to where if finding the right daycare and things in that matter. And how would you help set priority? So just definitely letting her talk through what's going on, what her expectations and fears are.
Okay, good. That's a good point. Okay,
And can
room
I
number
add?
two. I'm sorry.
And I was going to add too, when we were talking about skills, we talked about that setting, making sure that, if since she's a stay-at-home mom, she's kind of stressed, possibly having that conversation with her in her home environment where she can
Okay,
feel safe uh,
okay.
in there and everything else that Alexis said. I think that part is important to make sure that she's comfortable because we already know she's having those feelings of guilt and she's stressed out. So possibly having it in an environment that's conducive to her, to where she can see her baby while we're talking and feeling comfortable to
Yeah,
share.
good point, Stephanie. And besides that, she gets to stay at home. So she doesn't have to worry about packing up baby, getting to somewhere else. So that's a great point, Stephanie. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, room number two is Haley and Laura and Natalie and Tamarish.
Hi.
Haley.
Oh, tomorrow just got off. You can talk tomorrow if you'd like.
That's fine. We can pitch in. So,
It can be a great thing.
Laura, poor Laura, she was having some technical difficulties and she couldn't come in. But it was basically me and Haley, and we were just basically saying the things that we would say to Maria is that we would let her know we understand how you feel. We would show that empathy. We would encourage her that any decision that she would make would actually be the best one for her and her family at that time. We wanted to make sure that we brought praise for her setting goals and priorities for going back to school. Always give that mole of confidence to let her know it's good to do that. Haley also said we will ask her what would be the alternative. If you didn't set these goals and these things, where would that lead your family? Kind of allow her to build her own roadmap and just kind of allow her to set her own priorities and goals and just help her along the way. We want her to drive her own priorities and goals, and we just kind of be her cheerleaders.
Yes. Good. Good. Yeah, because it's important that they feel like they're in the driver's seat. You're just there.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yes. Haley, did you have anything to add?
No, tomorrow just knocked it out of the park. Yeah, just at the beginning, I think the only thing that I wrote down was asking, like, what feelings are coming up for you, and how do you notice those feelings arising? Like, where do you how is that impacting you? Just allowing her to share, is it anxiety, is it fear, is it sadness, so that we can really get to the root of whatever that is. But yeah, always letting our clients have that autonomy and over their own narrative, because so often our clients are pigeonholed into really tight spaces where they can't navigate themselves very easily. So yeah, just trying to reframe them as the hero of their own story.
Oh, great. I like that. They're the hero of their own story. Thank you. Okay, room number 3 was Abby, Faith, Heather, Jessica, and Karen. We've
I
got
can,
somebody.
yeah, I
Okay.
can do it. So
Thank you, Faith.
we talked about just taking a lot of time to validate the feelings and the stresses that she is kind of working through. But then also making sure that she felt like she wasn't alone. We talked a lot about finding support through groups of moms who are going through similar things, so she can get encouragement from seeing that other people are also kind of navigating this situation, and that she's doing a good job, and that she is trying to do the right thing for her and her baby. And one of the skills that we talked about using was motivational interviewing.
Good. Yeah. Yes, that would be a really good skill. Anything else? Okay, thank you. Now, room 4 was Frida, Kayanne, Lacey, and Teresa.
I don't have a whole lot to add. I feel like everybody has covered it. One thing
Yeah.
I was also thinking was motivational interviewing, just, allowing her to see, that these feelings are normal, but also allowing her to kind of asking those open-ended questions and leading her along her own path as far as like, okay, what does this lead to? And, a lot of the similar things that everybody else has shared. What's the alternative? What's this? And just validating that her feelings are normal. That praising her for wanting to do all of these things, and just again kind of helping her lay that roadmap as to what's most important to her, and then helping her fill in the goal or the holes of like childcare and those things if she's really focused on doing school and work and those things.
Yeah, she's trying to do a lot. Okay, and then Kimberly, you were in a room by yourself, and I apologize, but Kimberly, do you have anything to add?
Everyone pretty much said the same thing. My main thoughts were to be an active listener to her, to make sure you give her a chance to say what she like to say, want to express, continue to encourage her as she comes up with her own goals and her own thoughts of how to set her goals and the next steps she would like to take in moving forward with raising her child, whether it's with the father or without. I would put those questions in front of her. How does she feel about moving ahead without the father if he continues not to participate? What would that look like for you? So, like everyone said, using those open ended questions, giving her a chance to speak on it, and setting her goals and encouraging her.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody. And so, y'all of course had a lot of good answers and good ways to help Maria move forward. So let's continue talking about some things. So, what did you think about, how did you show empathy toward Maria? And I heard what you said. You said, probably said things, I understand how you feel, and you validated her stress and her feelings. So that was showing empathy. And almost everybody mentioned using open-ended questions rather than the closed. But if anybody wants to just chime in and say, what nonverbal cues would you give to show empathy? Anybody can just unmute and chime in. So what nonverbal cues could you use to show empathy?
Nodding, yeah, I was gonna say what Haley is saying, kind of leaning in and nodding your head as she's talking, giving her confirmation or affirmation. Definitely that you're listening to her.
Yes, absolutely. And like I said, those are so important too, because so much of your communication is nonverbal. So you may just say, yeah, I understand, but if you're sitting there like that, you're sending a mixed signal. Okay. All right. Now, some kind of hints or things that you can use to have a successful conversation or a dialogue when maybe you need a little help. So, of course, I'm sure you all probably know about paraphrasing or reflecting. So, paraphrasing is putting what they say into your own words. So you may tell Maria, so, well, what I'm hearing is that you're really stressed and you feel pressure to go back to work and you really have a lot of guilt about leaving your baby. Is that right? So you can paraphrase. Number one, it lets them know that you're listening. And two, it lets them know if you got it right or not. And sometimes even if you say that, they'll say, oh, well, and this too. So it really can also promote more conversation. Priming is when you think that there's something else they want to say, but they're not saying it. So let's say that you're talking to Maria and you're getting to the end of your meeting and you say, Maria, is there anything else that you want to talk about or anything else you want to share with me? And she does something like, well, no, not really. And you go, that's not true. Her nonverbals said something different. So you can use priming. And that's when you kind of state your best guess about what's going on with them and then encourage them and make it feel safe for them to share. So you could say something like, well, yeah, Maria, I know you say you don't have anything else to share, but I get the feeling maybe there's something else. So if there is something else, please just go ahead and share. We've got plenty of time to talk about it. Okay. So priming is just kind of maybe putting another good layer on that pathway that says, okay, it's still here and it's still safe to use this pathway to communicate. And of course, you can tell that from their nonverbals. And that's really when you can use the priming, is when their nonverbals doesn't match what they say. Okay, and so we're going to talk about safety for a little bit, because safety is actually the foundation that needs to be there, that has to be there to have a good conversation or a good dialogue. Because when people don't feel safe about sharing their story, their situation, or asking for help, they become defensive. They can stop listening. They can stop talking to you. Or they may even feel so unsafe that they just end the meeting. They just, I have to go now, So, we're going to talk about, why do people not feel safe? And they could feel like they're being criticized, or you don't share the same purpose or goals that, maybe Maria feels like, I want to go back to school, but I don't think you share that goal for me, or they feel like you don't share the same meaning about the situation. And maybe Maria feels like, you don't really understand what stress I'm feeling, what guilt I'm feeling. So that's some of the things that can erode safety. But here again, I want to emphasize that safety is paramount to having a good conversation. So using those verbal and nonverbal skills and doing all those things to prepare and having dialogue is absolutely building a safe environment. Because like I said, if you don't feel safe, then you shut down in one way or the other. Some of the kind of default reactions, and you can see these nonverbal skills here on the slide, is some people just dig in. Nope, I'm not going to do it. I don't want to do that, even though I know it might be the best thing to do. I just don't want to do that. Or I'm going to do this or whatever. Or they just give in. They acquiesce. And they just, it's like almost they agree just to be able to move on, or they go silent. They just stop talking, or it's like we just talked about, or they lash out. So some of the things you can do is find a mutual purpose, get back to that mutual purpose. And sometimes you even have to agree. You have to say that out loud. You have to say that out loud because they need to hear that you agree you both want to find a solution, but you're having a little bit of difficulty with it. And you've kind of gotten stuck So admit that, get that out on the table and say, okay, feels like we're stuck a little bit, but if you agree, we both want to find a solution. And then you ask again about their purpose first. Why are you here? What are your expectations? What do you want to accomplish? So you get back to that. And one of the things that I found is very powerful is find the and. So you could say things like, I hear you want to go back to school, and I want to make sure you get there. Now, going back to school right when she goes back to work may not be the best situation for Maria, but you can let her know that that's also a goal and you want her to get there. So there's, oftentimes nothing more positive than hearing somebody says, I hear you and I want that for you too. So that's what you're saying. So find that and, okay? So you can see how that can make a difference there. Okay, now we're going to talk about Maria's safety. So we're going to go in the breakout rooms again. Hey, all right, looks like everybody's back. So I apologize, I didn't tell you to pick someone to report out. So if it's okay, I'm just going to go by room and ask somebody in that room to report out. So in room number 1, I kind of know Stephanie. Stephanie, could you tell us what your group decided you would do in this situation?
Well, we said we would kind of walk with her, or kind of walk out behind her and see what led to that, giving her a little space and time and allowing her to talk, understanding the fact that, this is probably our first time meeting her. She may be a little apprehensive. We don't know what her contact is with systems. And so she's not going to share everything with us, and she may be defensive because we're in her life, in her business or whatever, and her not wanting us to do, but just giving her, see if she needs to take a break, if she's willing to talk about it, asking maybe what led to that. Is it something that we said, kind of what triggered her response to walk out, trying to get to the bottom of that without being pushy.
Okay, good. Good. Okay, in room 2, what about tomorrowish? Could you report out what you all decided to do?
Yeah. So Kimberly brought about some good points. She would we would use gentle words to bring her back. We would want to address what did we actually say that made her feel that she had to be in a defense mode. We will also let her know that we do feel and we do hear you, and create a space where she's allowed to get defensive if we are per se opening up traumas for her, as Laura mentioned. Just let her know you are again in a space where you are allowed to feel the way that you are feeling, and just use gentle words, gestures, and techniques to bring the conversation back.
Great. Absolutely wonderful. Thank you. I like that you say you assure her that you are allowing that space for her to react to those triggers, to react to those situations and everything. Great. Great. Thank you. Okay, in room 3, what about Faith?
Yeah, so we talked about that there's a lot of listening that you can do kind of leading up to that, to kind of prevent pushing in a direction that's going to cause her to want to leave. But if she does have that choice, and we're available to support, and we're, available to reach back out when she's ready. But she definitely has that freedom to choose, in that space. But yeah, kind of trying to prevent through kind of seeing if she's reacting a certain way to a certain question, we may not need to push during this time, and maybe at another meeting we try asking again later, maybe. But there's definitely ways to kind of field that.
Yeah. Okay. And room number 4, I don't know, is KN available to report out, or she?
No, I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah, so we talked kind of about, letting her know that we recognize it's stressful. It can be a lot. It can be a trigger. But also, providing her that space that it's okay for her to leave and we validate how she's feeling and, we're available to readdress at a later time. One of the girls in our group also mentioned like a safe word. So in some of these situations,
Okay.
before we even have that conversation that we know could be triggering is like, hey, if at any time this gets to be too overwhelming or too stressful, like here's a safe word that you can use and we can stop at any time. So I really liked that. But yeah, very similar, like giving her some time to cool down, but also recognizing that sometimes in that moment when we're heated and frustrated, like anything you say to me in the next 30 minutes to an hour is not going to mean anything. And so just giving her some time to recognize that, to validate that she's feeling overwhelmed and stressed and that there's a lot on her plate and that we are willing to readdress it at a later time.
All right. Thank you. Everybody had such good ideas. So thank you so much. So we're going to move on now about safety. And like I said, I'm going to, talk about safety for several minutes. So, so Maria got to where she didn't feel safe. So what do you do to return her to safety? And you all had some really good ideas about that. So when talking about safety is eroded, sometimes when your intent is misunderstood or miscommunicated. Maybe she felt like, okay, you're really just trying to push me into something here. Or like maybe there was a trigger word or something like that. But if your intent is misunderstood or miscommunicated, that can make the other person feel safe. So that's not so much about content, but intent. Okay. So maybe, all of a sudden Maria thought, your intention is not to help me. Your intention is to push me into this direction that I don't want to go in, or, push me to make this decision or set this priority that I don't want. So you can state your intention by using contrasting statements. And I think these can be very powerful. Sometimes you can also, I think someone mentioned this, do nothing for a few seconds to just let people kind of calm down a little bit. Sometimes you just have to sit, let your body relax a little bit just for a minute or two. Okay. But the important thing you can use is contrasting statements. So you do that and you stop talking about content and talk about intent. So instead of talking about different ways to get childcare or something like that, or different places that she could check out to go get childcare, you talk about your intention. So your intention is to help her find a place. Your intention is to help her find a place that's comfortable for her, that's affordable for her. So you clarify again what you want for the conversation. So you explain what you don't intend and follow that by what you do intend. So you say something like, I didn't intend to, make you feel angry or frustrated or more stressed. I'm trying to, help you set priorities and find good childcare. So you may say something like, I didn't intend to make you feel overwhelmed. What I intended to do by suggesting some options was to let you think about them so we can discuss them later. Okay, so you see, again, that clarifies your intention. It also clarifies that you heard what Maria's wanting, what she needs to do, what her priority is, and that what you didn't want to do. But the other thing and I just use that word, don't let the word but get in there. So it's not good to say, I didn't intend to make you feel overwhelmed, but what I intended to do, because from what I've learned, that negates the first part of the sentence. So stay away from the word but, just say, I didn't intend to do this, or I'm not trying to do this. I am trying to do this. Okay, so you use those contrasting statements. Okay. And like, other than using that word and, I think this is a really powerful communication tool when you've got a misunderstanding going on. So we're going to go back to Maria one more time. At your previous meeting, you suggested that Maria talk to her mother about keeping her baby. When she comes back for the next meeting, she gets angry and is frustrated and says the program isn't helping her, and she feels you don't have her best interest at heart. Now, in the interest of time, we're not going to do breakout rooms. So I'd like for people just to unmute, please, and just say, what would you do? So Maria is angry and frustrated. She thinks the program isn't helping her. So what do you do? So anybody just unmute and chime in, please.
Definitely ask for specifics. Ask her what it is that she still needs that we aren't offering her.
Okay.
And I would ask her, like, in her opinion, what could I do to accommodate her?
Oh, very good. Very good. Yeah. Anybody else?
I would give her a minute to just kind of calm down and really think things through, because, you know, in an emotional moment, you're going to overreact and you're going to be frustrated. So I think just letting them take a step back and really process, and then approaching it again to see if maybe if you come at it from a different angle, they feel like you're meeting their needs a little better.
Yeah, like I said, sometimes that silence, that little moment of silence, just kind of let everybody calm down. Okay, anybody else?
Definitely not be defensive yourself when she comes with, you know, with that, but just ask her, okay, talk to me a little bit more about, you know, this, so we can kind of work together so we can see how we can help each other.
Okay. Yeah, and you could say things, I'm sorry that you're frustrated and angry. Can you tell me more about that? Or like you said, tell me how I can help you. And, you know, just, you know, validate her feelings. I see that you're angry and you're frustrated, and I want to help you. Okay. All right. Very good. Very good. Okay. Now it's time for action. So you've met with Maria. You've agreed on a mutual purpose and what she needs to do. So before you leave that meeting, you need to create an action plan. So, because if you leave without an action plan, it really was just kind of a conversation. You may have shared, you may have had dialogue, but it means a lot more, and it'd be more productive if you have an action plan. Even if you know you may not meet with them again, that they're, you know, they've moved on and they're going out of the program because their child is aged out or whatever, you can wrap it up and agree that you don't have any further meetings, but then talk about what goals she has after that. You know, maybe she's not going to start school for another 6 months, but talk about that goal. So you need to create an action plan. If nothing else, just write down a few goals, what Maria needs to do before you meet again, what you need to do before they meet again. So again, you're building that mutual purpose and building a positive situation and a result for her. Okay. So then afterwards, you reflect, you manage to get her calmed down, and you agree on some goals. And how would you interact with her in the future? We're not going to really discuss this, but I want you to think about how would you interact with her in the future? And this is when, after the meeting, you reflect on, okay, she came and she was really angry and frustrated, and I did A, B, and C, and that worked pretty well. Okay. So if it happens again, you know, this is what I can do. Or maybe it didn't work very well. Or maybe you realize that there was a triggering situation or word. So it's going to change how you interact with her in the future. I won't use that word, or I'll rephrase that somehow. So you reflect on the meeting and your role in that meeting and how you could make it better and more successful. Okay. Now, at the very first, I ask you to think about your conversation. So I want to go back to that just for a minute. I want you to think about that conversation you're not having, or that you had and it didn't go well. So what is your purpose? What was your purpose for having that conversation? What was behind what you were advocating? What do you think the other person's purpose was? Or what do you think it is going into that conversation? And what can you agree on? and the other thing, an example that I came up with is it's not work related, but I know that lots of times if you're living with someone or you're married or whatever, quite often the household chores aren't divided up very easily. And I've had a lot of friends and all this talk about, well, it's just not fair. I have to do too much of the stuff, and all this kind of stuff. Well, if you finally decide you want to talk to that person about it, how do you approach it? What's your goal? So what could you agree on? You could agree on that, we've been kind of having a difficulty agreeing on who does what. So can we talk about an agreement? And that would be different than saying, I'm getting really frustrated because I feel like I'm doing too much. I'm doing 80% of the household chores and you're not. So you can say how you approach that. And think about what's behind what you're advocating, what you're pushing for. Okay. So you can just think about that a little bit later. And so we talked about several different skills today. So we talked about reflecting before you have that conversation and practice. So you may want to reflect on this situation with Maria, and before you meet with her again, maybe practice. What if she gets angry again? Plan. Maybe come up with some questions that you want to ask. Make the meeting environment safe, of course. Use active and deep listening. Use the tool of dialogue versus just conversation. So use questions like, tell me more about that. Tell me how you're feeling. Watch for safety. And of course, a lot of that's going to come through nonverbal cues. Use contrasting statements. What I didn't intend to, but I intended to, okay? And of course, create a mutual purpose and a pathway. So make sure that the other person understands you've got a mutual purpose here. You're both working on the same goal, and that's for them to be successful, okay? Some of the skills we talked about today. So what now? So for the next couple of months, I want to challenge you to pick one of the skills that that you just talked about and practice them every day. Now, chances are you're doing some of these already, just listening from the conversations and the feedback. So you could even say, okay, after that meeting, I really used dialogue in that meeting and that went well. So sometimes you can just reflect, okay? But when you feel comfortable with that, add another skill. So maybe you realize, well, I want to try those contrasting statements. So the next time I have a situation, I want to try those contrasting statements. So try those. And when you get comfortable with that, then try another one. Okay? So, any questions at this point? These are two of the resources that I used in this course. Crucial Conversation is a book that I highly recommend. I've had this training, and it's very, very good. And although it does talk a lot about work situations, it's applicable in your life, in any area of your life. And of course, the other one was Dialogue and the Art of Thinking Together. And that was William Isaacs, and he's the one that said, the dialogue is the art of thinking together, and it's a conversation that doesn't have sides, it's in a circle. Okay. Well, if there's no questions or anything like that, thank you so much. I appreciate that. I think Chase is going to take this recording and put it up on the website and all that kind of stuff. So it may be a little while before it shows up there. But if you have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out. My email is pj@utk.edu, and I'd be glad to answer any questions or hear anything you had to say about how this course helped you. And I hope it did. So thank you very much.